All right.
All right, we are live. My guy, Sean Sotaro, Taxstone got 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Break it down for me.
All right. So, hey, good to see you, AG, and hi to everyone listening, watching. Yeah, it was a wild sentencing hearing. I want to say off the bat that, it was a very intense emotional experience. Uh, you know, Ronald McFadder's family spoke. Taxstone gave a long, emotional speech of his own, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But so the bullet points are Taxstone was sentenced to 35 years, which is more even than the prosecutors were asking for. They were asking for 30. But the judge said basically, look, I'm going to sentence him to a bunch of consecutive sentences on a bunch of counts because there were 4 victims in this case. And the judge basically said, I want him to feel that once he finishes a sentence for one victim, he's going to start a sentence for the next victim.
Okay.
The judge said basically so that he's, when one sentence ends, he's not going home. He's paying for what he did to the next victim and the next and the next. So that was one of the reasons for a very, very long sentence. Yeah, I guess, do you have any, I can kind of go down beat by beat what happened, but if you have any particular questions you want to know off the bat, I'm happy to answer them. Or if people have anything in the chat they want to throw in.
Absolutely. Well, when you first got in there, were there a lot of people there to support Tax, and what was the tension like in the courtroom?
Yeah, it was obviously a pretty tense courtroom. It was about evenly divided, maybe a few more Tax supporters than, friends and family of the victims, but it was not packed to the gills, but pretty full room. Lots of people there to support Tax, lots of people there who, were friends and family of, Ronald McFadder was killed, maybe some of the other victims. And yeah, there was at least one person in a Free Taxstone shirt. It said, hashtag Free Taxstone on the sleeve, which normally,
wow,
the courts don't really love that. I assume no one saw it because again, it was pretty small on the sleeve there. Normally they obviously don't go for that kind of stuff. But yeah, there was sort of Taxstone supporters on one side and everyone else kind of on the other side. And they actually, as you saw, AG, and the stuff you were in, they had to leave the courtroom separately, and they actually wouldn't let the McFadder side out until Tax's supporters had left the floor, not just left the courtroom, but gotten in the elevator and gone down to another floor.
Okay. Was Manolo Rose there?
I am not sure. I can say that Trife was there. Obviously, Ronald McFadder's, one of his very close friends. Lots of people were there. I'm not sure if Manolo Rose was. Okay. I would imagine so, but I'm not sure.
Now, I heard that the McFadder family refused to because they do allow the victim's family to speak.
And they spoke at the hearing. They wouldn't comment to me afterwards.
Just break it down in order. What comes just after you enter the courtroom?
Yeah.
Break it down.
So basically, here's what happened, right? I get in there. Basically, it becomes clear right off the bat that part of the prosecution's argument for arguing for a 30-year sentence is they're saying Tax is a, predicate felon, right? He had prior felony convictions. He had stuff in around 2007, 2008. There was a gun charge. There was a robbery. They went through it all, and I can kind of go into details if you want, but they used that to paint a picture of Tax as someone who, was violent even before this incident and had a history of felonies, and thus give him a big statement. There were a bunch of people who spoke. There was a sister of the victim. There was an aunt and his mother. And so just the stuff they said, that was obviously very emotional. They were crying. People on their side of the courtroom were crying.
Wow.
A lot of them said stuff about forgiveness, and to Taxstone about, forgiveness. I need to forgive you. But obviously they still talked about needing closure. And, talked about how they wished that Ronald McFadden was still there. They talked about him as a protector, right? As someone who, would have given his life for anyone, not just Troy Ave. There was his aunt actually gave a very emotional speech, his Aunt Michelle, who said that Tax actually used to hang out with her brother, a guy she said was named Treetop. So, she knew of Taxstone. She said she had seen him when they were younger, hanging out with her brother. She said, "You took away my heart. You took away my family. I forgive you, but I'll never forget what you've done." And then at the end, she said, "God bless you. I hope you don't burn in hell."
Wow.
And that was just a very crazy, moment when she said that, right? The whole court, both sides were just wild. His mother spoke last. She was obviously extremely emotional. It was two sisters, his aunt and his mother. And she brought up, she said that her son's character was, she said, quote, trampled on during the trial. She didn't like some of the stuff that the side was sort of trying to get across about her son and his history and maybe what was going on that night. AJ, obviously you were there for the whole trial. Some of the stuff they were saying and implying, right, about him. And so she objected to that strenuously. She said that right before he got killed, there had been some kind of incident where he protected a woman who was being beaten by her boyfriend near the Brooklyn Bridge or something. She just really said, he was someone who protected people and did heroic things. Yeah. And she, interestingly, she said at the very end, she used the words, "My son was set up." And she said to Taxstone, "I forgive you. I forgive Troy and anyone who was involved." So the mother obviously has a lot of feelings about everyone who was there that night and the violence that took place. I, tried to talk to her afterwards. She understandably wasn't in a mood to talk, so I didn't get to really clarify what she meant by that. But, I think that, what she meant by Troy being involved or her son being set up. But she obviously is very emotional, and I think holds everyone who was there at least somewhat responsible.
Right.
So yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Can I ask something?
Of course.
While this is all happening, do you notice Tax's expression? What is Montgomery's expression? I'm not sure if Montgomery was even there, but
Montgomery was there. Kenneth Montgomery, Tax's primary attorney, was there. There was another attorney as well, whose name I didn't catch, on Tax's side. They were largely, I didn't see much of a reaction until towards the end. There was some stuff towards the end that got, when they started talking, the prosecution started talking about stuff on Tax's podcast and some of his tweets and things, that got Taxstone visibly upset. And when they started talking about, the witness tampering stuff that came up during the trial, even at the end, Kenneth Montgomery strenuously objected to that. I see someone asking, was Big Body Best there? Yes, Big Body Best was there. I talked to him briefly afterwards, nothing relevant, nothing to quote, nothing germane, but yes, he was there. Yeah.
I wouldn't pay attention too much to the comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so basically, Kenneth lost a important legal argument basically he was saying, look, there are different counts of assault here. There are 4 victims, but let's count this all as one incident, right? I think when the judge is thinking about this, he should think of this as one incident. And the prosecution was saying, no, look, for each count of assault, for each shot, basically each of those can be seen as a separate incident. And the sentences should run consecutively, one after the other, rather than concurrently, sort of having one sentence count sort of for all of them. So the judge was very clear that he saw each of these shots, each of these assaults as separate incidents, which kind of gave you a hint that he was maybe going to give a major sentence. Okay. And so then it was kind of time for the prosecution to speak and Tax and Kenneth each to sort of say their piece, right? And the prosecutor, Keaton, she kept saying this is senseless violence, right? This is the epitome of senseless violence. And she brought up Tax's past convictions in some detail. I think you can know why, obviously trying to set him up as a certain type of person. Then, in probably the most contentious part that actually drew some outcries from Taxstone supporters, she started bringing up stuff he said on the podcast. And tweets he made, stuff about like F the police, stuff about how like I slap bitches, and how he made sort of obliquely threatening tweets about like forgive your enemies but first get even. Wow. How he made statements about shooting, how you should shoot first, statements about like guns and drugs and prostitution. And her reason for bringing this up, she said it doesn't matter if any of these were true. She said basically, look, Taxstone's side is saying he's such a good guy, he's such a positive influence on the community, he had all this positive stuff in his podcast that was influential to like, black men and other people. And like, he was a positive guy, right? This was something that Tax's side had raised in their documents they submitted before sentencing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so her argument is, okay, yeah, he said some positive stuff on his podcast, but he said a lot of negative stuff too. So like, let's not take this, he was a positive influence stuff too seriously. Her exact words were, he may denounce violence occasionally, but he also glamorizes it. So that was why she brought up all this stuff about like his podcast and his tweets, which, like I said, that really raised the ire of some of the people in the courtroom. They were audibly like exclaiming about that. And then she said that Taxstone is not taking responsibility for his actions. He showed no remorse. Even now, right? He's still not showing remorse and that kind of stuff. So she really kind of leaned into that, including she brought up Tax's Instagram posts, his recent ones, where he talked about Troy Ave and he talked about Malcolm Kenyon, one of the witnesses.
Right.
And she said these Instagram posts were, quote, not the action of a man who is remorseful. So, it sort of hits on a lot, her speech hit on a lot of hot button issues, right? Bringing up someone's artistic output, their podcast, bringing up their social media, both his old tweets and the stuff that he posted even after the trial on Instagram, she brought up to try to use against him in this sentencing hearing. Mm-hmm. Right. Incidentally, Kenneth Montgomery sort of hinted that if they appeal, it might have something to do with Malcolm Kenyon and some kind of objection to his testimony. You might be able to talk to that a little bit more since you were there for the whole trial, but he dropped a sort of oblique hint that if they were to appeal this, which I imagine they will, it will in some way center on Malcolm Kenyon and his testimony. So I would say keep an eye out for that.
Okay. By the way, just for the people, that I will post that testimony paperwork soon.
Yeah, definitely. And the state asked for 30 years. Kenneth Montgomery got up there next, and he sort of got on this idea of that what happened that night in Irving Plaza was a lot more complicated than we heard in the courtroom, right? Mm-hmm. He basically said, look, everyone's up here talking about how, all the victims had this, they're presenting a very sanitized, to use the word sanitized, version of all the victims, right? Painting them as like wholly innocent and Taxstone as like this violent guy. Whereas what happened was a lot different than that. And he said, sure, Tax posted some stuff on Instagram, but you know who else talked about this case a lot in his songs and his social media? Some of the other witnesses. He specifically meant Troy Ave, right? Troy Ave in his songs and in his social media is like talked about the case, talked about threatening stuff, whatever. So, why hold this over Tax in particular? Montgomery also took time out to mention something he's talked about a lot lately, including in public appearances I've seen him in, and that's Troy Ave's relationship with the NYPD. As you remember, Troy Ave testified, hey, before I go to concerts, I call the hip hop police just to tell them, hey, I'm going to be there. You can expect it, blah, blah, blah. Right. And Kenneth definitely hammered on that, about Troy's relationship with the police. Right. And so, yeah, basically Kenneth was saying, look, this wasn't a case of one guy being violent. This was violence going on in all directions, right? So let's take that into account, take the whole package into account when sentencing. So, he said there was a struggle, but there was much more to the struggle than we heard in this courtroom. So you can kind of take that, you can see where if they would appeal, this is, some of the stuff, some of the ways they might go to. Taxstone was very adamant, very dramatic. He kept insisting I was attacked. He kept using that word attacked, right? I was attacked. I was jumped. I was protecting myself. That was what he kept saying over and over. He said, Troy Ave is somebody who has a history of attacking people who don't like his work, don't like his music. I am just someone who I'll joke about everyone. I joked about Troy Ave. I didn't, threaten Troy Ave. I didn't bully Troy Ave like they tried to say in the trial. I joke about everybody. Sure, I joked about Troy Ave, but I joke about lots of people all the time. And he actually said this, he said he was fighting for his life in that moment. And so he seemed legitimately shocked to still be in a courtroom at this point when, what he was doing was fighting for his life. And he very pointedly said, Malcolm Kenyon convinced me to go to the club. So I think, again, you can see that if they appeal for this, Malcolm Kenyon's going to be central. One thing Troy Ave said, he was talking about that Taxstone said, he was talking about the way he was being portrayed by the prosecution as someone who was violent and who bullied people and all this kind of stuff. And he said, quote, they try to create me as the Joker when all I do is crack jokes. Which was a very notable thing. And at the end, he explicitly said, and I tweeted this, some of you may have seen this, half the stuff that was told on the stand by Troy Ave is a complete lie to protect himself from going to jail. And I see an interesting comment here from as well. Do you think a more contrite final statement from Tax would have resulted in a lesser sentence? That's a very good question. And there's not a counterfactual, right? There's not like another world we can go to where it appears contrite. I don't know. I don't see a world, honestly, in which, given all of Tax's public statements before and after the trial, I don't know if I don't see a world in which that would have happened. Maybe it would have if he had, from the second he was convicted, not posted on social media, written a statement, talked about how contrite he was, apologized to the family directly rather than saying, I'm sorry, but I was attacked. I don't know. Sometimes that stuff can sway a judge, but it's impossible to tell. Rec Record says he was tweeting without remorse and the prosecutor used it. That is absolutely true. Again, we don't know what was going on in the judge's mind, but certainly the lack of remorse didn't help. Someone mentioned Fed time in the comments. The federal stuff is still ongoing. So yes, he still has to be sentenced for the Fed stuff. We'll see what happens with that. That is still ongoing. This was just for the state case.
Sean, can I stop you for a second? Let me ask you. I just want to backtrack. When Montgomery said that Troy Ave has this relationship with the hip hop police, what I still kind of don't get what we was trying to get at. Did he just put it out there? Did he go into detail a little more? Because
he didn't really go into the detail. It's just something he's been saying. I think it was, I don't want to spin out any implications of what he may or may not have meant, but basically he kept hammering on Troy Ave has this relationship with the hip hop police. Troy Ave brought guns to the club surreptitiously in a car, right? Okay. And I think whatever connection you want to draw between those things is the connection Kenneth Montgomery maybe wants you to start getting in your mind, right? I don't want to say anything outright for fear of putting something out there.
So for the people, let me just state for the people. What do you think that Montgomery meant by that? I don't know if was it a good thing, was it a bad thing?
I think he was trying to, in my opinion, right? I think maybe he was trying to imply a level of like cooperation between Troy Ave and the police, maybe against Taxstone in some way. Like it's a little unclear, but I think he's just putting a lot of stuff in that. I think also part of it is just trying to affiliate Troy Ave with the police and make him a less believable or sympathetic witness in the public mind.
Okay.
Right. I think that's another part of it.
Oh, I see. I don't get what does that help? I don't know if doesn't that help the situation?
Right. The trial's over now, right? So I don't know. I think it's it's
I'm so confused.
It's taking shots, right? So we get to this point, all of this has happened, and the judge starts talking, right? And it becomes clear to the person who asked before, it seems like he already kind of had his mind made up because he didn't take a ton of time to deliberate afterwards. He didn't go into his chambers. There wasn't a long break. He just sort of heard everyone and then read his sentence. So basically, he said, I don't understand this rap world. Maybe at some level I'll never get it, right? But nothing I've heard explains to me why Taxstone brought a gun into the club. Nothing explains to me. Here's something he said. Nothing explains what was obviously the procurement of fake testimony. So you remember this, AG, right? There was this whole thing about there was a cell phone in jail with some messages that seemed to indicate he was trying to get some witnesses to lie on his behalf. Mm-hmm. The judge stated fully that he believes that that's what happened. The judge in this case firmly 100% today said, Tax tried to get people to lie on the stand for him.
Okay.
Which obviously the judge, it wasn't up to the judge. The judge wasn't going to say what he thought. That was up to the jury. So we hadn't known the judge's take on this before. And I just want to say to one commenter, Dartmouth, did he have a good lawyer? Yes. Kenneth Montgomery is a fantastic attorney. He's had a number of great cases defending all sorts of people, including other people in hip hop. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. He's incredibly smart and a great attorney. You don't win every case, and so, the judge basically said, look, there was one point the judge is kind of talking, and at one point he says, look, I'm going to give this guy a sentence that will allow him to get out at a very elderly age, but not before that. So it was at that moment that everyone in the room knew this was going to be a very serious sentence. He hadn't said the number yet.
Wow.
Right? But as soon as he said this thing about he's going to be in prison until a very elderly age, we knew it was going to be decades.
Wait, can I stop you right there? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have to ask. When he said that, did you notice Tax's side, the people who are there to support Tax, the expression on their faces?
I didn't see faces because I was writing so quickly. I will say the air went out of the room. It was at that point the quietest room I'd ever been in. Wow. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was dead silent. It kind of knocked the wind out of everybody on both sides, as did the ultimate announcement of the number of the 35 years.
Continue, please.
Yeah. So he basically ended up getting. So there was this whole issue, like I said before, are the sentences going to be concurrent, run together, or will they be consecutive, one after another, which means, of course, you end up serving more time.
Right.
And basically almost all of them, except the gun charges, were consecutive. So on 4 counts, 3 of them for 10 years, 1 for 5 years, they all ran consecutive. The gun charges ran concurrent. So that's how you get 35 years, right? And when he announced that number, again, you could hear a pin drop. I will say Kenneth Montgomery explicitly objected to the judge saying that Tax had procured false testimony. Montgomery said explicitly there was no procurement of false testimony. Tax, after that, basically he just had just about enough time to, people were shouting their support for him. He acknowledged them, said he loved them, and that was about it. I talked to Kenneth for like a brief second afterwards, and he said the main thing he said was it was a pleasure representing Taxstone. He said that multiple times, and then he said basically he brought up this thing again about the sanitized version of the events, the sanitized version of the victims, that there was one bad guy and some innocent people, and that he regrets that is sort of the narrative that the court ended up going with. And like I said, the sides had to leave separately. It was obviously a tense spot, right? Like you have grieving family members and you have people supporting someone who just got sentenced to spend, a very, very, very significant amount of time in prison.
I know somebody asked, will he appeal? And I think that's obvious.
I would say, look, I didn't get a chance to ask Kenneth that, but it seemed almost certain. He seemed, like I said, to be kind of laying out almost a strategy. Some of it will send. It seemed like it will center in some way on Malcolm Kenyon and his testimony in some fashion. And so we'll see. But I would guess, I don't know for certain, but I would guess that there will be an appeal.
Yeah, I'm just basing that off of Taxstone's tweets. I've been reading his tweets. It's been very interesting leading up to this day.
Yeah. So obviously, Tax obviously on social media has been criticizing Malcolm Kenyon as well, as was brought up in the trial today, or excuse me, in the sentencing hearing today. So yeah, you can tell that that's sort of a pressure point that they will bring up when and if there's an appeal, which seems pretty certain at this point.
Wow. Well, if anybody has any other questions for Sean, please take it away.
Yeah, say in the comments. Yeah, I guess here someone says I've known Tax for years. Everything he said is the truth. It's just that karma will come back to you in some way. I obviously don't have anything to say about that. I wasn't there in the room. But again, Tax was adamant today up until the last minute that he was defending himself and that people were lying about what happened on the stand. That has been his consistent take. And it remains so, even when potentially saying, look, I'm so sorry, I take responsibility, may have helped him. He stuck to this this take on the situation.
Well, anything that we that you would like to say that we may have missed?
I mean, look, this was, this was a very intense afternoon, a lot of emotion on all sides. Obviously, the family, was crying a lot, was devastated. Tax's supporters, obviously very emotional, wishing him well, shouting him out. Stuff like this is never, is obviously never good for anybody.
Right.
And we still have, that's, it is a big period on the story, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the end of the story. It seems like, there's obviously one more case on the federal level, and also, the potential of an appeal, something of that nature. But right now, the most immediate thing is, it looks like Darrell Campbell will spend a whole lot of time in prison, and that's awful. That's no good for anybody. So these situations are just always very difficult, and you just feel for everyone on all sides.
Right. I know there's a couple of questions that I see, but I'm not sure if you have the legal background to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
One says, can he appeal for a shorter time? Does he have to do the whole 35?
So I don't really have the expertise about that. I'm not sure. I know that, obviously I have, as you know, AG, I have a lot of experience with federal cases where the deal is you do, I think, 85%, they take off, X number of months per year of your sentence. I am not sure what the situation is in state. Maybe someone in the comments knows what the deal is with New York State.
Mm-hmm.
But the judge was very clear that his expectation is there wouldn't be even the possibility of parole until, Taxstone is in his words elderly.
Wow. Wow, this is a little story that's been lingering for years now. That this happened 2016. This is 2023. So
yeah, it's been 8 years getting this all together.
Right.
Yeah, I guess 7 or 8 years putting this all together. And now it's done. And I think I will say, the prosecutor bringing up social media and podcasts, that to me was a big takeaway, that A, that she did it, but B, also that there's enough public pressure around that kind of stuff that she had to say, look, I'm not saying what he said was true. It doesn't matter if it's true. I'm just raising it for this one very specific reason. So obviously that's still a very loaded and controversial issue, using people's artistic work against them, using people's social media against them.
Right.
And none of that was allowed at the actual trial. So I think that's very important. And that was, in my mind, correctly decided by the judge.
She tried, though. She tried.
But she still tried, right? Even after it was ruled out of bounds at the trial, she still tried. She still brought it up at the sentencing. Right. So it's, that, unfortunately, the use of that stuff doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. For more on that, there's a great book called Rap on Trial that I recommend everyone read that talks about the use of rap lyrics in court cases. Right. That gives a good overview. I'd say everyone should read that.
For the person who asked anytime served for the 7+ years, I'm sure he does. I'm sure that's going to be applied to his sentence, right, Sean?
Yes, I would be certain that I would imagine the time he served so far would be applied for sure. They didn't explicitly say that at the hearing, but I think you can count on that.
Yeah, it's 35 consecutive with the Fed time. I'm not sure how it works. I could speculate that once, because he hasn't been sentenced for the Fed time yet. Once he served his state time, I think the Feds just like literally just take you and then boom.
Yeah, put you in the next. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there might be a little jurisdiction of like who gets, which time does he serve first or whatever. But yeah, I think it will be, I think it will be separate. They might, well, here's the thing. If the Fed time ends up not being significant, they may just effectively say, look, let it run concurrently. Don't worry about it. Rather than worrying about moving him to a different prison or something to that effect. Right. So I've seen that happen before. That may happen, but we don't know yet.
Right. Well, there it is. Hopefully we could get a word with in the future with Montgomery about this whole thing. I'm not sure if he'd be interested, but I know you're the only one who would know.
Yeah, it's possible. I think now that it's over, we'll see. Kenneth, if you're watching, definitely, always down to talk. I saw him, seen him a couple times this week here and then at a public event. So, hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to him again soon.
Yeah, because a lot of these questions, I would love to hear what Montgomery has to say.
Yeah.
Well, there it is, Sean. One more time. Where can they find you, and what other projects you got going?
Great. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SameOldShawn, SHAWN. Probably the best place. And if you like, me talking about hip hop and the courts, I wrote a book called Dummy Boy, Tekashi 6ix9ine and the 9 Trey Gangster Bloods, all about the Tekashi case, which you can find anywhere they sell books. And, the guy I'm talking to today, AG, actually met him during the Tekashi case. He was there basically every hearing, not just the trial, not just the big stuff, but, all of the little hearings where they just tell you when the next hearing is going to be. Sometimes there'd just be, 2 members of the media there, me and him. So he's an expert on it as well. But yeah, I have a book about the Tekashi case called Dummy Boy. Yeah. And yeah, I'm doing a bunch of freelance writing. So keep an eye out. Follow me on Twitter. I'll let you know. Got a bunch of big things in the works that I can't talk about too much, but hopefully you'll hear about them soon.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah.
My friend is watching. DJ Academics.
Oh,
yeah. DJ Academics, man.
Hey, how you doing? My former coworker at Complex over there at DJ Academics.
There it is, man. Shout out to Ac. There it is. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate your help so much.
Thank you, AG. My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
There it is.